Thank you for subscribing to KCWG The Truth Extra, our premium content channel. We have copies of our shows, plus exclusive content from our hosts and their guests. Also, as a subscriber, you'll be invited to participate in giveaways and events. Thank you for supporting and listening to KCWGthetruth.com, the best internet radio on the planet.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Good morning. This is JaMarr Brown live from the KCWG The Truth Internet Radio, the best internet radio station on the planet, where I partner up with the pastor and Mrs. Starks to do a show that we've thought about for a while, and it's all about celebrating people and celebrating those in the Corona community that are truly making a difference, and those names that you may not have heard of. There may not be CEOs of companies or individuals that are part of some of the major organizations in Corona, but they're making a significant difference. And we're going to recognize someone today that, for the moment I met this gentleman, I was very impressed, and I heard him speak at an event a couple of weeks ago, and I said I'm going to have him on the show. And that person is Don Williamson. Don, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. My pleasure to be here, of course.
Excellent. We're gonna discuss your background in a second, but before the people on Facebook Live, hi everybody out there and everybody in the entire internet world. The Celebrate You show is all about the idea that in the past, there was this idea that we would reject each other, that you have a different opinion, or you're a different race, or you have different values from a different culture, or a different business, or you're a competitor, that people would just reject each other. And we said, wow, I mean, that's such a wrong place for us to be. And then that morphed into tolerating people, where we may not agree, we may not come to a middle ground, but we smile at each other, shake each other's hand, and have pleasantries. But then we go to our corners and nobody's minds were changed or anything like that. And one idea that the pastor had a few months ago was to start celebrating people, celebrate different perspectives, celebrate different ideas, and recognize individuals that are truly making a difference. And that became the Celebrate show. And a part of that was to celebrate individuals in the community through the Spirit of Excellence Award that the that the KCWG, the Truth Internet radio station, gives out to individuals, and when that morphed into this radio show. And so, Don, you're someone that we definitely want to celebrate today.
No, I'm very honored to be here, and I think that's a great goal and a great thing you're doing here to do that, because the more we talk and discuss, the more we understand each other, and you get to be friends, and that's just a great goal, and I'm proud and happy to be part of this.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for being here. Those of you that know, I also host the Break It Down Brown show, where we do things like this. We bring people on and we break it down. We break down life and issues to find the deeper meaning behind the things that take place, and we're going to do a lot of that today through Don's story and his background. So let me give you his background, then we're going to dive right into our discussion. So Don Williamson was appointed to the Historical Commission in 2013. He's been a Corona resident since 1957, so a long history in Corona, and he still considers himself a member of the last generation that grew up while it was still a small town. For those of you that have driven around the 91 or the 15, you know that it's booming like crazy here in Corona, and there was something new that was announced, a new development that's going up really soon. I'm sure you'll speak to as well. Don has co-authored a book on local history, written many articles, and is a sought-after speaker on Corona's past. In 2015, he founded the Corona History Association, which we're going to spend a lot of time on, which is a devoted group of individuals that want to raise an accurate awareness of the history of Corona, particularly the plight of the Hispanic community. He is retired from the retail grocery business, and he's also an officer of the Corona Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors, and was appointed to be a Corona Library Public Trustee in 2012. So you're not very busy at all, are you?
I try to stay out of trouble, but find myself getting into trouble sometimes. But yeah.
Well, real quickly, I know when before we started the show, I know you're an avid baseball fan.
Big
and
baseball
you were saying
fan.
You went to a game last night and something significant happened.
I saw the Angel pitcher, Andrew Heaney, pitch a one-hitter, which is just one hit away from immortality.
Excellent. So, Don, let's get into your background a little bit, because you've been a resident for since 1957, And just tell us a little bit about your background growing up in Corona.
Sure. I came here as a 3-year-old, so you can figure out how old I am. My dad's business moved here, and it was a small town of approximately 10 or 11,000 people at that time. Okay. Virtually everything, if you're familiar with Corona, that was south of Olive Street was citrus all the way to the hills. The kids I grew up with here, their parents all worked here, and I was very fortunate to get here in those days. There was no 91 freeway, for example.
Wow.
So it was kind of an island back in those days. We had downtown, which we don't really have anymore, and it was just a really great experience to be here before the crowds came. And I think about it all the time.
Right. Well, it's funny. I've been out here 15 years, and I still thought at that time the crowds, weren't here yet, but they're here now. So
they're here now. Well, it's funny because when I started kindergarten in 1959, there were approximately, like I said, 11,000 people here. When I graduated from Corona High in 1972, there was about 28,000, and we thought it was the end of the world because the town had more than doubled at 28,000.
You know what's interesting? My daughter, who's here, by the way, I'm going to teach her how to be a businesswoman this summer. That's our goal. But she's here working the controls. She's a student at Santiago High School, and to me, I just find it fascinating that there were 1,100 residents in Corona. Santiago High School alone has like 4,300 students.
It's amazing to me. Well, up until my first year at Corona High School, the kids from Norco went to Corona High as well.
Okay.
Well, my sisters went to kids with Corona High.
Okay.
So it's amazing to me, too,
Wow.
how many high schools and how huge this town is. We have 53 schools in the Corona Norco Unified School District. The day I started, we had 7. So
wow. Unbelievable.
it is unbelievable. It really is.
Well, let's do this. Let's talk about some of your early memories in Corona. Before we get into I'm going to talk about some of the cultural evolutions and changes in Corona. I want to focus on that. Just talk about your background and growing up and some of the most significant memories you have from your childhood.
Yeah, I lived out Fullerton Avenue, which if you're familiar with Corona, I was out in the middle of the orange grove, so I really didn't have a lot of other kids around me and stuff. And that's kind of why I turned into a baseball fan. I had baseball cards on the radio, and I really spent my summer concentrating on baseball, and that's how that started. But it was really a pretty you really did know most people that you ran into, or you knew about them, or you knew who they were. You really couldn't be a stranger here. In fact, I remember having a friend. I was with him in downtown Corona. We must have been about in 4th grade, and I can't remember what he did. But by the time we got home, somebody had called his mother, and he was in trouble. So you really couldn't get away with anything. You'd see your teachers at church or in the supermarket. Now, after school you never see them. But it really was a good experience. I mean, it wasn't Mayberry by any stretch of the imagination, but there was a lot of familiarity and comfort. And it was the 50s, early 60s, so it was still kind of a naive time. And to be a kid here, we would go down to the Corona Plunge at the city park. We played at the city park. I did anyway because I was on that side of town. Go down to Lincoln Elementary School, and other kids would be there. We'd play baseball all day. I mean, it was kind of what you thought it should be.
Excellent. Okay, well, let me ask you this. I know over the years there's been a number of changes. Has grown quite a bit. Just talk about some of are there some specific events over the last 2-3 decades where you're like, wow, this really is a point of change in Corona?
Sure, and I can think of one right off the top of my head. In fact, at the Corona History Association, I did a symposium on it a couple months ago with a guy named Jim Pauley, who's been in the Corona since the 40s and was a businessman downtown, and that was urban renewal. That was when downtown Corona got knocked down and rebuilt into what we have down there today. And it really changed the whole fabric of Corona. Businesses left. We lost our retail center at the end of the day. That was a huge thing. It was like a civil war here where people did want to do it and didn't want to do it. One thing that was always consistent in Corona was change. And the historic Civic Center on 6th Street, I have a sister that's quite a bit. She's 10 years older than me. She went to high school half her years in that old school, which turned into the Civic Center.
Interesting.
And now and so I got to see that operate. As a historian, I got to see that operate as a high school. So I have a real advantage for that. But that closed, and the high school on 10th Street opened up, the one that I went to. The City Hall, we had a beautiful City Hall. We had a beautiful Carnegie Library. You saw it was a series of losses. For a kid that was here growing up and liked familiarity. I will say this: that we had a lot of new kids coming into school. Schools were being built. It was always overcrowded, but everybody welcomed everybody. I don't think it was not in any way exclusionary back in those days.
And I think something interesting, and we're going to talk about this in just a second in terms of some of the cultural changes in Corona. And my experience in the past 50 years of being here, it to me was shocking to hear about some of the history of Corona. knowing that over the past 15 years with me and my family being raised here, that it's just been a tremendous community. It's been a welcoming community. And it's just been a pleasure to raise a family here. And so, I'm teasing the audience a little bit because I was fascinated by some of the stories you shared most recently, and I'll get into that in a second. What I want to do is I love history. I absolutely love history. I can't say that I'm a scholar of history, but I enjoy the idea that history is oftentimes told by the winners. And the losers oftentimes don't get their story told, or they're told by the people that conquered them or that beat them. And so there's a spin to it. And I also believe that history also is really what we think of it. There's the event of history and the actual happening, but then the reality is that you can sort of change history by changing your perspective. I know you know a ton about how history has been changed and edited and so forth and so on. So just talk about your passion for history, because I know you're involved in and you created a foundation for to study the history of Corona, and you did part of the Corona Public Library and a number of things. But where did that passion for history come from?
Let me go back into my background. When I started first grade, my teacher was the first Mexican-American woman ever hired by the Corona School, the Unified School District at that time. Her name was Connie Acevedo. She was a remarkable teacher. She passed away a couple years ago, and I was blessed to give her eulogy, actually.
Oh, wow.
And she was recognized as just a top-notch teacher. Well, while she was being my teacher, her husband, Onias Ace Acevedo, was being the first Hispanic city council member in the history of Corona. We've only had 3 others since, which is another story, shockingly. But anyway, so that was here. This was a woman that I loved, and I loved her whole life after I met her, who was so special to me. And I didn't realize it at the time, but segregation was very rampant in Corona. Well, it ended with Brown versus the Board of Education. We even had a separate school that we built to send the Hispanic kids and the Italian kids back in the turn of the century, and it was open until the 50s. Wow. But Brown versus the Board of Education stopped that. But what they did here in Corona and all over the country, they would gerrymander, switch the districts, and so the neighborhoods would be separated. And when they opened up Garrettsville Elementary, they made the boundaries so that was mainly the white kids who went there. And I was fortunate enough, I went with the Hispanic kids. I was a minority kid. If you look at my class pictures, we were either split or, it was very close. Wow. I was so lucky to have that experience of being in that world with make those lifetime friends. Wow. And it was just one of the luckiest things I ever had. And my fourth grade teacher was a woman named Julie Salgado, who had grown up here in Corona. And so in my formative years, they were Hispanic teachers. I never even thought of a difference. I truly didn't until I was in junior high, that I didn't even realize. And that's a credit to the people who experienced the segregation here in Corona. They didn't talk about it. They didn't pass it on to my generation. We were all treated equally. And that is why, again, now I can come forward to the Corona History Association. Okay. There are other historic groups in Corona. The people who started those are not Coronans. They came here in the 80s or late 70s, and they never would talk about this. They would never talk about the segregation or the Ku Klux Klan that was here or any of the bad stuff, because this is your hometown. You really don't like to talk about the bad stuff. And I was compelled to start my history association, not to talk about the bad stuff, but really to honor the people like Mr. and Mrs. Acevedo. There's a woman named Frances Martinez that my organization asked the city to change the community room at the library in honor of Frances Martinez. If you go there today, there's a community room in honor of Frances Martinez. I want to celebrate these people. I want to celebrate the people that made Corona a better place, that brought this equality, that I just respect and love them so much that I don't know. And as I believe I'm the last generation of a small town, I feel a duty to do this. And that's what I do.
Well, I'll tell you what, what's interesting about your background, and I share this with people all the time. I was just interviewed. It was a legacy interview. And they talked about my background, and it was interesting because I was talking about my professional background and my career and things of that nature. And one of the things that hit me was I grew up in San Diego, which is a pretty liberal town. Everybody kind of gets along. It's not Jackson, Mississippi, or any place like that I've been to, which is a completely different situation. But my neighborhood was predominantly African American. My grammar school was predominantly Hispanic. My high school was predominantly Asian. And then college was predominantly white. And so what I realized is that I was brought up in an environment where you celebrate other cultures, you celebrate people. And it was never a thing of you're going to so-and-so's house, oh, they're Hispanic or they're black or they're white. it was just going to so-and-so's house. I mean, they're good people. They have good parents. And so I think that's one of the reasons why, from my perspective, I've never looked at a person's skin color. It's like, are you a good person or not? Do you have a good character or not? And it sounds like, because at such a young age, you were sort of ingrained in that. You had the same experience.
I actually did. And, what you just said, you quoted Dr. King, judge people by the content of their character, not the color of their skin. And I did learn that really, like you, at an early age. And that's why I'm so for integration and having, let's all get together. Right. For some reason, it's a weakness of our species, of mankind. So early on, we all seem to learn that if you're not like me, I hate you, and that we have to overcome that for some horrible reason.
Right.
And that's what makes this country great. That's what's going to move us forward, and that's what all of us should be striving for.
Well, and I agree, and I think, and you could speak to this because from what the talks I've heard you give, I believe this is where your heart is, and you could correct me if I'm wrong. And this is where I am personally, and that is that I don't believe in calling people out and pointing out that's bad and that's bad. I believe in just recognizing people that are doing the right thing.
I agree.
And in business, when I coach a company or a person, oftentimes most companies have a find what's wrong. Let's find what's wrong and highlight it and blast them and ridicule them. And I'm like, you know what? Let's have a find what's right award. And that's what we're doing here at KCWG, the pastor and I, with this show, is we're finding people that are doing it right. And we're highlighting them. And hopefully with the sheer focus and the amount of effort and energy based on positivity and learning and growth and sharing, that sort of trumps anything else that's out there. But, let me know if you're there or what
you're right. And I wish I could say in my personal life I was further along like that, because I do have a tendency to be that way. However, in my organization, the Corona History Association, we are not like that. And that is what we actually strive to do. We started the Circle City Hall of Honor a couple years ago to put in people who changed Corona.
Excellent.
And we're going to do that every year. And we want these people never to be forgotten. For example, we had the first young man that was killed in Vietnam that we put in, the guys who founded the city, Mr. Acevedo, war hero Mitch Salgado, who was in the battles of Korea. Anyway, people like that who really shaped Corona and made it a better place. But no, you're absolutely right, and that is the correct approach. Mm-hmm. Also, what I've learned in my life from personal experiences, anytime you go negative on people, it just reflects on you more so. It makes you. It diminishes you,
right? More
than it diminishes your victim.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I want to talk about, because I was literally fascinated by a talk you recently gave. It was at the American Legion a couple of weeks ago. And for those of you that may not be familiar with this, the ELR, which is the Executive Leadership Roundtable group, which is part of the Corona Chambers, a group of leaders that really go around and learn more about Corona so they can provide even greater assistance and help and support to the Corona community through business, through philanthropic activities, and so forth and so on. And so I'm an alum of that group, and I know that this past year's class did a tremendous thing where they helped to refurbish the post. And so talk about their class project, talk about Joe Dominguez, and just talk about the significance of that.
Sure. This is just a great Corona story. And I'm also an alum of the Chamber ELR class. So they do a lot of good. Each class picks a project. And I will tell you, I have one of the days where I'm the instructor. And part of my tour was going to the Joe Dominguez post, and this class picked up the post was originally started. The first construction was in 1947, so it's an old building. Okay. But let me tell you how the post started. After the war, all the men came back from the war, and it was mostly men in those days, and joined the American Legion. It was a tradition. The American Legion is going to celebrate its 100th anniversary next year as an organization, and there was already an American Legion post here in Corona. That in fact is still on Main Street. Today it's called the W.H. Jameson II American Legion post. Well, all the men came and they wanted to join the American Legion, including the Hispanic men. Growing up in Corona, I had always heard that the reason, and then there was, I'll just cut to it. The Legion would not let the Hispanic men join their post. Now here's guys that just want. Many gave their lives, many put their lives on the line, and they wouldn't let them join. So what they did, instead of putting their tail between their legs and running, these courageous men and women, they started their own post. And they named it after a young man who was really the all-American boy. He was an athlete. He was a scholar. His name was Joe Dominguez. He got a sniper killed him in the South Pacific at a little island called New Britain. and they decided to name the post after him. He was one of the first local men killed in World War II. And what they did, they organized and they made a thriving post that served the community. And it's funny because growing up, the myth was, well, they all sit around, all the veterans sit around. They decided it would be better for the Hispanics to have their own to help more, to get to more. Well, I have it from the first commander, the late Ray Aparicio, who told me personally, no, they would not allow us to join. And you'll see books on the History Corner where that's what they'll tell. In fact, when I gave my presentation, I put one of the books that said, this is just not true. And again, to honor those men and women who were courageous and started that post. It's a story that needs to be told and remembered. That in this adversarial situation, they still progressed and surpassed really today what the other posts is at. And I have to be, in all fairness, that both posts exist, both posts are fully integrated, both posts work together. That was a long time ago, right. And those days have passed. But again, it's still nonetheless the history that you can't hide from.
Well, what's interesting, and I know the ALR raised, I don't know how many thousands of dollars. It was pretty significant.
About $70,000, I believe.
$70,000 to, and the celebration was just amazing.
Fantastic.
There were hundreds of people there, and your talk was just, it literally was I've known you for a while in terms of different events and things like that, but when I heard you talk there, I said, we need to celebrate, Don, and I'm really glad that we're here. So for those of you that are just joining in, we are with Don Williamson, who is the founder of the Corona Historic Association, History Association, Corona Chamber board member, library trustee, and part of the
Riverside County Historic Commission.
So just someone who has a tremendous amount of history in Corona. So one of the things I want to touch on is my grandfather, he fought in World War II in the Army, and we would sit down before he passed away. He would just tell me stories, and what I thought was just fascinating was that he would tell me stories that he would be in certain countries, and he would be, fighting in those countries and helping to liberate individuals and people in those countries, but he wasn't welcome in those countries. And I just thought, I'm like, how to have the I don't know what it is to fight for an ideal that trumps, how you're treated personally is just unbelievable. And it sounds like you have a lot of knowledge of the history of people that did just that.
It is unbelievable to me as well. And I found out that Corona was a hotbed for the Ku Klux Klan in the 1920s. I have so many examples. The largest rally, Ku Klux Klan rally in Riverside County history, occurred out Auburndale, probably about where the intermediate school is today. Back when the population of Corona was approximately 4,500, there were over 5,000 people, according to the newspaper at the time, in 1923 that went to this Klan rally out there. I mean, that's a huge crowd for those days. That's just a lot of hate. And we really did not have African American. I even in my day growing up, there were no African American children here. I graduated with 3 African American kids, I think, in my class. And it boggles my mind. And to think, I have 2 sisters, like I said, that are older than me, that when they were born, Jackie Robinson hadn't broken the Major League color barrier. I'm a big baseball fan, and I just cannot wrap my head around that African Americans in my sister's lifetime couldn't play baseball. Wow. Major League Baseball. I can't get it. I don't get it. And it's very hurtful and disturbing. And this is what I learned. As I said, I really loved Mrs. Acevedo and the Acevedo family. Right. And for me to think that someone who was so wonderful like that was somehow thought less of or discriminated against the color of her skin, it makes me angry today. And like you want to hit somebody. Right. And I can only imagine what it's like to be a minority, and you have your family members that you love, and they get treated like that. I mean, no wonder everybody's angry. It's just it's a horrible, horrible thing.
Well, what's interesting, and we could share so many stories back and forth, and I just want to share this with everyone to kind of give, because I think it's important to provide different perspectives on what we're talking about, and really our discussion, from my perspective, is not about just racial issues and tensions. It's about celebrating people that are making a difference and showing how people can collaborate and work together. And I've been on the board for the Corona Chamber in Corona, and just as you're on the board now and have had opportunities in Corona. And so it's important to understand this history, but I think it's also important to recognize kind of how far we come along. And one of the best examples of that, and I would love to get your reaction to this, was I remember I was flying for business to the East Coast, and I got upgraded to first class. And I usually, call my parents before I fly, and we check in. And I was talking to my mother, and she said, "Oh, son, what airline are you on?" I told her the airlines. "Oh, I got upgraded to first class," and she was silent. And I'm like, "Mom, what's wrong?" And she goes, "Wow, I wonder what that's like." And I said, and because from my perspective, it was a big deal, but I had flown first class before, so it wasn't that big of a deal. And then she started telling me that when she was growing up, they had segregated bathrooms, and she had to go to the back of the bus. I'm like, that's my mother who was 72 years old. So we're not talking about 80, 90 years ago. And so, but to me, it was on one hand, I'm thinking, wow, the sacrifices she made to give me this opportunity, and she was never bitter, never angry, and just always was encouraging, supporting of me, and never told me to be bitter about anybody else. But the reality is, her life was a living hell at times. And then here I am, young African-American man able to do those things. And when I say able to do those things, to me, that sounds ridiculous, because it shouldn't be like, oh my God, I'm able. It's like, it should be, everyone should be able to do whatever they want to do. You know what I mean? As long as they're doing the right thing. But it's still, there's a hint of that still there. So,
well, that, and again, I touched on that a little bit earlier. That's what makes me admire the people who went through that, and they didn't pass it on. Again, I was, when I went away to college and I went out of state, I was a little arrogant because I didn't think we treated minorities like they did in the South, for example. And then I come back and I learned it was exactly the same. And that's the thing about Corona history. Corona wasn't special. It was just like everywhere else. We were bigoted. We were segregationists. It was that was the history of the United States, unfortunately. And things have gotten a lot better. And hopefully we're still moving forward on that. I mean, there's still issues, as we all know.
Absolutely.
But things are way better than they were for that generation and for previous generations, and that's something that we can take heart in. That people fought back and they succeeded.
Absolutely. And so let's do this. I mean, the time is going by super fast. I'm definitely enjoying this discussion, and man, I wish we had an all-day time to talk about the entire history. But I think we've at least set up just some of the historical perspectives in Corona and the realities, and let's fast forward to sort of some of the evolutions, and what do you think are some of the things that have really made a positive difference in Corona or in this area, and then in terms of how we are able to collaborate now as people that are in this community.
Well, again, we came from an environment where, if you were Hispanic or Italian, you went to the other school. And before they built the school, I've found evidence now in reading old letters that they had separate classes for the Hispanic and the Italian kids. So from that point of view, that ended really in the mid-'60s for sure. Dr. Stallings put it, the guy who was the superintendent of schools, who we named a school after, in about 1964, once there was the final Civil Rights Act, stopped it. Okay. I mean, dead in its tracks. So we are very integrated, and opportunity for all. That was a big improvement, and that's another thing. Our school district. I had again Mr. Aparicio say that when things were really tough for the Hispanic community, they went to the educators. There was a woman here named Letha Rainey, who we also named after a school after, who was an educator here up until the 50s, and she would go to bat and help out and do things like that. There was an era when there was a woman who was running for the school board in 1924, I believe, 24, 25, who ran on the platform of segregation. And she was running against an incumbent who was who wanted integration. She won in a landslide. And at the time, her husband was also on the city council and the mayor of the Corona. So that's just kind of, after dark and until the 30s, up until the mid-30s, Hispanics better not be on the north side of 6th Street. That was a delineation point of north of 6th Street and south of 6th Street. That's all gotten better, and really before my lifetime. It's hard for me to say things get better because I loved Corona so much when it was a small town, and it's gotten big, and it's hard, and things, most of it's been damage control, right. Because I was here before the freeway. We put the freeway. Now we're just doing damage control because we have this freeway and the horrible traffic.
Right.
But I would say that it became more diverse in Corona. We do have an African American population, which I'll tell you, and I'll be honest with you, it was strange for me to see African Americans here in my hometown because I just did not grow up with it, and I noticed it, and not in a negative way, but right. It's just like, African Americans are here, and which I welcome. Right, I mean, right. It's just that's the diversity of our nation, and I mean, I don't know what I missed by not having friends that were African American as a kid growing up. Really,
Right.
And
Here's here's a funny story. I have so many stories to share. I was at this restaurant that used to be here. It was called Mill Creek. The 91 freeway came through it, and it's torn down. But I remember I was sitting out there one day. I was working on one of my books, and there was this young white kid, tattoos from head to toe, and I'm sitting there writing. He's just staring at me, just staring. I'm writing. I'm trying to ignore it. He's staring at me. And then finally look up. I said, "Hey, how are you?" I went to shake his hand. He got shocked, and he goes, "What are you working on?" I said, "I'm writing a book, and this and that." And we took up a casual conversation. He goes, "Let me ask you a question." He goes, "Oh, I got to be honest with you. I used to be part of. I used to be a skinhead, and my parents were this and this and that, and they were racist, and I was raised this kind of way, and I was taught that black people are a certain way." And I said, "Oh, that's interesting. Tell me, why you think that." He went into this deal about how he was raised. And I said, "Let me ask you a question." I said, "Have you ever sat down and talked to an African-American person?" He said, "No." And I said, "Then how do you know how we are? How can you just go off of what somebody else tells you?" I said, "Isn't that kind of ignorant?" And he kind of smiled and said, "Yeah." So we talked for about a 2-hour period, and we talked, we joked. I bought him a drink, he bought me a drink, and my point is that's the whole point of this show and what we're doing. When you communicate and talk and sit down, you'll learn that we are so much more. We all have, like my daughter's here. We have children, we have grandchildren, we have families people are fighting for. We all want the same thing.
We all want the same thing.
And so I think if we met at that level, like, what do we all want? How can we all work together as opposed to what's different and not different, especially if it's based off an ignorant opinion, which you've never talked to a person, you've never really done your homework like you have. So you just assume all these things and you just take things at face value, which are completely false. And so that's one of the reasons why the pastor and I, KCWG, and part of my show, invited you here, wanted to celebrate you and recognize you because you get it, and we really appreciate that.
Well, and I'm not that great a guy because it's just obvious to me. I mean, I'm not doing anything other than reacting to the world around me. I really, I'm not a great guy. It's just how things are, I mean, I get it. You're right. I do get it. But, that's exactly that's exactly the right approach. And it is ignorance. I mean, it really is. People don't know people. And that's why I said, that's why I'm for integration. And that's how we get to know each other.
Absolutely.
And we all do want the same thing. We all have the same things in our hearts, and that's what's so horrible about the hatred. And it's ignorance. Right. And, right now, there's a lot of people from the Middle East who have moved here, and specifically Muslims, and there's so much hate for them right now, and in many places that they have expressed to me, they feel, and I give speeches at intermediate schools about the history of racism and Corona, usually based around the topic of Brown versus the Board of Education, which stopped segregation, and this one little girl sent me a letter thanking me for giving her hope.
Wow. To
understand that that kind of behavior had gone on here before and gotten better. It made me cry. I mean, I'm just talking to these school kids, and I touched this little girl and gave her hope. That was so special to me. And, if I can never give somebody hope, I mean, me, wow.
Absolutely. Well, you were making a significant difference, and the remaining time that we have, I want to jump off that point because what you were doing, and one of the things that we try and stress here on the Celebrate You show is that, we want to encourage people. You don't have to do something grand or something grandiose to make a difference. You don't have to, open a school or give $800,000 to a charity. You can go to a school and speak, whether it's for free or you have your books there, and you're making a difference in the lives of people. I think when you show people that there's hope, that they're special, that they're valued, that they matter, that is making a difference. I don't know what bigger difference anyone can make in this world. So I thank you for what you're doing at those schools because it is making a difference.
You kind of just quoted Jackie Robinson, who said, the only thing special about someone's life is the impact they have on others. And Jackie Robinson is just one of my heroes. I'm lucky I got to see him before he died at Dodger Stadium.
Oh my goodness!
I saw this man, this great man.
You got to tell that. I got to tell that story.
Oh well, Jackie Robinson. Hopefully everyone knows was the first African American to play Major League Baseball. Right. Just an incredible talent, multi-sport talent. He mostly grew up in Pasadena. Went to UCLA and. toward the end of his life, and he died in his 50s. He was a really young man. I was in high school. This was 1972. Even then, I was going to baseball games all the time, and it was the first Old Timers Day ever at Dodger Stadium in 1972, and they retired the first three numbers of players. It was Sandy Koufax, Roy Campanella, and Jackie Robinson. And I got a good seat because and I was close, and I got an up close view. I saw Jackie Robinson, and he was pushing. He was almost blind himself from diabetes at that time, and pushing the wheelchair of the great Roy Campanella.
Wow, that's incredible.
And I just got to see him.
That's amazing.
A man that changed his country for the better, and so many. He's such a hero to me. To what he put up with, and still went out there and became a Hall of Fame baseball player. Just what an incredible man. And I wonder if that helped him die young. That stress that he carried with him. What an incredible human being that I just feel so fortunate I got to see him.
That's amazing. That is amazing.
And
I've seen the movie. Unfortunately, I wasn't around
42,
to see him play. I
yeah.
saw the movie 42, and I encourage everyone to watch that movie, or even you go on
Please.
YouTube and watch videos and excerpts and things like that. But it's just absolutely amazing. To your point, to be able to perform under those conditions, I mean, it's fascinating.
It is fascinating. I mean, it was the things the other players said to him, and for 5 years he made a deal with Branch Rickey, who had signed him, that he wouldn't fight back. He wouldn't say anything. And after 5 years, boy, he was a dynamo.
Oh, that's funny. Well, Don, it's been an absolute pleasure. And what we'd like to do is in our remaining, we have about 10 minutes or so, I'd like to talk about legacy. And, and I want you to kind of talk about what you would like your legacy to be here in Corona, for you personally, and
Sure.
what have you thought about in terms of legacy?
I've thought about it a lot, and I retired about 6 years ago from the grocery business. I was an executive in the grocery business, and really, I want to tell and leave behind me the correct history of Corona. Again, there's other historic organizations. They have a lot of stuff out there. They did the best they could, but a lot of what was out there in our plaques and stuff just are not. It's getting better, but just not very inaccurate.
Okay.
There hasn't been really any definitive book written about the history of Corona. There's been some picture books, and that's all they really are, picture books. But I have a book very close to being published. I hope to have it published this year about the history, my take on the history of Corona, and to have that out there, to correct some of the things that are wrong, to establish my Corona History Association to last after
Yes.
I pass on. That is really what I hope to do before I get called on to move forward. Because again, this is just one little speck on a map. If you pull out a big map of California, this is one little dot. But it's where I grew up, and it's what I know. It's really insignificant. There's no money in it,
Right.
But I know a lot about it, and a lot of it from memory. Me growing up here was still a lot of the original families from the turn of the century. I mean, my grandma was born in 1890. Corona was started in 1886. So I mean, in that perspective, in the big picture, it's not that old. None of it's really, but the families were still here. A lot of the people who were in Corona history, they grew up with their families. They were the business owners downtown, and I really knew them when I was in high school, or just out of high school, actually. I was a campaign manager for a guy who was a 2-term city councilman, so I got involved with city politics as a young guy. So I really experienced a lot of Corona history, and I have a pretty good take on the ebb and flow, and what makes my perspective, I think, a little different than others is the I do have that insight in the Mexican American community,
Right.
And that is really what I want to bring out, and truthfully, I've succeeded to a certain degree. Now people in town know who Francis Martinez is. They know about the segregation and the hatred that went on here, and I've opened a lot of eyes, I believe, and I hope to continue to do that because, as we've discussed, it's very important to me.
Well, absolutely, and I will tell you this. In terms of you mentioned a couple of times that you're. What you're doing is not special, or it's a small piece. I want to counter that. I think it's a significant piece, and here's one visual that I have, which there's many visuals, but one visual is this, and that is that people like myself, Corona has gone from a small town to now, I don't know how many people are here. I have no idea. It seems like it's
165,
and it's growing every single week and every day. And so, my point is that people that are coming here now are getting a chance to see a different perspective. they are getting a chance to interact with you and to learn from you. And guess what happens? Like, our children now are in a completely different environment than what was, there back in the early, days of Corona.
Yep.
But here's why it's such a big deal. And that is because our children are going to grow up different with a different perspective. And guess where they're going to go? They're going to go off to college and move and go to different cities. They're going to carry that perspective of everyone should be treated equally and fairly. Everyone, I understand the sacrifices that so many people made to make life better for others, and not just their own race, but so many other people. I mean, whether it's white, black, Hispanic, it doesn't matter, Asian. So many people are making such a major contribution to say, look, let's all get to know each other better. Let's all work together. Let's come together. And so you're influencing tens of thousands of people with what you're doing.
Well, that would be wonderful.
Well, you are.
That
you
would be
are.
wonderful.
You are.
And thank you for saying that. I hope it's true. I think small, but there is again, it's the old you learn by your past.
Yes. Yes.
And that's how society, civilization progresses, is learning from those mistakes. Yes. And
absolutely. What I'd like to do is we have something that's going to happen in just a second. But in the meantime, what other significant things do you think should be addressed today? Or it doesn't have to necessarily be about the history of Corona, or just anything that you feel should be something that we should be focused on.
Sure. Well, I think unlike many in Corona, I don't see Corona government or how we've done things here as the disaster that social media today is portraying it to be. It's like for the last 3 or 4 years, everything's a disaster. If you watch people that go to the city council meetings, and it's unfortunate. It's just got to be kind of at a bad tone right now. But really, it's, we have professionals that run the city. We have good people in our council that I have confidence in. It's unfortunate because people do good things, like they fix the freeway, and then they get criticized because there's still traffic. I just don't understand. There's been traffic here for before these people were born, mostly. I mean, it's not going to change, but I'm real encouraged. And you kind of alluded to it a minute ago. There's a new plan coming together apparently for downtown Corona,
right?
And that would just be position A.
Absolutely.
I for so many years, I'm so cynical about all these plans because there's been others that have fallen through. Hopefully, this is the one.
Well, from what I've read, I think it might be in terms of and I know people can go online and run on about it, but it could be the one.
I got to say one thing. People I don't think understand. People, all of a sudden they're building a house project, and people go down and complain to the city council. What those people don't realize is when this property was zoned for houses, say 20, 25, 30 years ago, people bought the property to invest in that reason. And then when it's time to build, that's when they cash in on their investment. So it's new to the people who are just seeing it, but it's been on the books for many years. If you try to change that, those people will sue the city of Corona and win. So when you go down to the city council, remember that. There's really no choice.
Right. Well, what I want to do is Don, thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Anytime.
Speaking with you, and I'm so blessed that my daughter's here. She got a chance to hear this conversation, and I'm sure she's going to go tell all of her friends about it. I saw her on her phone. I don't know, she was filming something, so we might be on social media already. But
wonderful.
In any event, what we'd like to do on behalf of KCWG, The Truth, the best internet radio on the planet,
thank
Dr.
you
Frank
so
Stars,
much.
we want to present you with the Spirit of
Thank you,
Excellence
Pastor.
Award as Pastor Frank Stars. He's working the booth today, so we couldn't be part of the interview. But let me just read this to everyone watching on Facebook. It's KCWGthetruth.com in partnership with JaMarr Brown. We proudly present the Keeping Covenant with God Spirit of Excellence Award to Don Williamson on this date in 2018. So,
this is
Don,
too
it's
cool.
Our pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you
really
so much.
it.
Thank you, Pastor. This really is special to me. Thank you so much. I will really treasure this.
Well, thank you. And it's just a small token to recognize all that you're doing in terms of keeping the accurate history of Corona top of mind and what we can learn, how we can grow from it. So
that's a great surprise.
Well, you know what? It's well deserved. Thank you so much. And any final words before we let you get back and do some more talks around Corona?
Yeah, let me just say,
Sure.
there was I'm going to run this quickly.
Sure.
We had a Potter's Field here in Corona where the poor people were buried. The current operator of the Sunny Slope Cemetery desecrated that property. We had that desecration stopped, and there's a lawsuit coming up. Hopefully that we will be able to make some more progress and get the crosses and some of the markers back up that were taken down systematically. And that's the greatest tragedy that ever occurred in Corona, was that desecration of the poor people's plots down at Sunny Slope Cemetery. And I just want the community to know about that. That's just a horrible thing that happened here that we kind of let happen over a 20-year span. People were being buried on top of graves, and the district attorney's office came and did some research and found that to be true. So while I've considered it a failure, we did stop further burials, and we were proven right. So I just wanted to let people know and be aware in case that comes up later, they'll need help on bringing back some dignity to Potter's Field.
Excellent. Well, and like I said, on this show, we want to give a voice to all perspectives and opinions, and we don't personally get political or take a side here or there, but we definitely appreciate you bringing up that issue, because I think things should be talked about, should be discussed. Yeah. And so we appreciate that perspective. I just wanted to get that out there. Much. Excellent. Don, once again, on behalf of KCWG The Truth, the best internet radio on the planet, and myself, JaMarr Brown, with the Break It Down Brown Show, we want to thank Don Williamson for being here with us today and spending some time talking about the history of Corona, some of the things that can be learned from the past, and how we can take that information and use it to continue to make the lives better for our children, for the people that are in this community, as they go out into the world and share their story of Corona with other people and make a difference in other people's lives. So, Don, once again, thank you very much.
Truly a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Everyone on Facebook Live, thank you very much. Everyone on the KCWG The Truth Internet Radio, thank you for tuning in, and we'll see everyone. Lexi, thank you very much, dear. Love you. And Pastor, thank you so much, and we'll see everybody soon. Take care.
You just listened to an exclusive KCWGTheTruth.com program on our subscription premium content channel. Thank you again for your support of KCWGTheTruth.com, the best internet radio on the planet.